Welcome to the AFI Summit presented by Audi. I'm Michael Lumpkin, the director of AFI Festivals. First, I want to thank those who support AFI Fest, starting with Audi, our presenting sponsor for the past 17 years. Also, all of our many supporters, donors, and AFI members, and you, our audience. Thank you for watching. And thanks to The Hollywood Reporter, our partner on today's summit session, Indie Contenders. This annual conversation is usually held in the Blossom Ballroom at the historic Hollywood Hotel, site of the very first Academy Award ceremony. But this year we are here, a virtual ballroom of sorts, welcoming viewers from across the country. Our Indie Contenders conversation is curated each year by The Hollywood Reporter's Scott Feinberg, and I'd like to bring Scott on now to get things started. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you, Michael, very much. Great to be working with you guys for the seventh year in a row on this panel, which really look forward to every year. It's an opportunity to celebrate 8 artists who have done tremendous work in indie films over the past year, and to discuss the challenges and rewards of working on that type of a project. Many of us enjoy, the big budget remakes and sequels and adaptations of comic books and board games and street signs and everything that dominate movie theaters when they're open. But I think that to those of us who also appreciate and hope for more, these guys are the real superheroes. They are out there, just doing great work under not always the easiest of circumstances. And so we'll get to discuss that with them once we get going. Obviously, this is a weird year. Some of these movies have already been in theaters before things shut down. Others are streaming and will go in theaters before long. But regardless of whether you've seen them already or not, the conversation should give you you should be able to follow the conversation. We'll try to talk about them in a way that makes it followable. And now let's meet these tremendous panelists. We're so lucky. I don't think we've ever had a group like this before. So let's start. On behalf of Amazon's Sound of Metal, in which he plays a young drummer in recovery from heroin addiction who loses his hearing and has to adapt to a whole new way of life, please welcome an Emmy winner for the night of, Riz Ahmed. On behalf of Amazon's I'm Your Woman, in which she plays a young woman forced to go on the run with her new baby after her husband gets into trouble with a dangerous crowd, please welcome an Emmy winner for The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, Rachel Brosnahan. On behalf of Sony Classics' 9 Days, in which she plays a godlike figure who gets to determine which of numerous unborn souls gets a chance at life, please welcome a SAG Award winner for Black Panther, Winston Duke. On behalf of Bleecker Street's The Assistant, in which she plays an aspiring producer employed in a low-level job by an abusive movie executive in pre-Me Too times, please welcome an Emmy winner for Ozark, Julia Garner. On behalf of Netflix's Pieces of a Woman, in which she plays a woman whose at-home birth goes awry and changes the course of her life thereafter, please welcome an Emmy nominee and BAFTA Award winner for The Crown, Vanessa Kirby. On behalf of Universal's The Invisible Man, in which she plays a woman who believes she is being haunted by her dead ex who used to abuse her. And on behalf of Neon's SHIRLEY, in which she plays a writer who beautifully chronicles the world but struggles to function within it, please welcome an Emmy winner for The Handmaid's Tale, Elisabeth Moss. And on behalf of Focus's Promising Young Woman, in which she plays a woman who begins leading a double life after a mysterious incident involving a friend, please welcome an Oscar nominee and BAFTA Award winner for An Education, Carey Mulligan. And last but certainly not least, on behalf of Neon and Hulu's Palm Springs, in which he plays a man who gets stuck in a time warp that forces him to relive the same day over and over again, eventually with a woman who finds herself in the same predicament, please welcome an Emmy winner for Saturday Night Live and a Golden Globe winner for Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Andy Samberg. So this is like the Brady Bunch. Thank you all for being here. And you guys can now, if you get a chance to unmute your mics, it'll be great to have everybody fully with us. And I will just say one thing I've just realized in the course of introducing you all. This really is the year of the woman. We have Pieces of a Woman, Promising Young Woman, and I'm Your Woman. So I guess the woman in the window and Wonder Woman 2 are not able to be here, but Thank you guys for joining us. So just, I guess to begin, so that, we're talking about indie films, I think it's important to sort of define what that looks like. According to Film Independent, the people that do the Independent Spirit Awards, these days they're classifying that as a budget of 22.5 million or less. I wonder if we can just kind of go around the horn, and if you can recall the budget and the days that you spent, the number of days that you spent making these. We'll obviously get into much greater depth about the projects, but if you happen to remember, I think it would help people to appreciate these can really be grassroots efforts. So maybe Riz, if we can start with you.
Man, I was just thinking as you were saying that 22.5 million would have been great for some of those kind of British indie films. Back in the day, I remember I've made, I think I made 2 films for $100,000 at different points, and they actually end up being some of the most satisfying experiences. I'm sure we'll get into some of the pros that come along with those cons, but for Sound of Metal, I think it was about $4 million, and I think it was 5 weeks, so 25 days.
Nice. Wow. Rachel, I'm your woman.
15 and 32 days, I think, in the end.
Okay. Vanessa?
Ours was around 4, and it was about 25, same as Riz.
Julia?
I'm like the worst with knowing the with budget stuff, but it was very low, and I mean it took place in one day. So, but we shot like I believe it was like 20 days, around 20 days.
Yeah, and I could be wrong, but I had seen a $1.1 million figure, which is incredible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Winston.
I was very low. No, I was just very low. So yeah.
Yes. Winston, nine days, the movie.
Oh boy, 9 days I think was about 4.5, and we shot it in 23 days, and we got through, I think it was like 116, 120 pages of mostly dialogue in 23 days. And I distinctly remember being bigger than my trailer. Like I couldn't stand up straight. Couldn't stand up inside my trailer. That was the whole thing.
Oh my gosh. Andy.
$17, 2 days. Most indie. Listen, I can't believe you didn't say it took 9 days.
I felt like that was like the expected answer, you know what I mean?
That's not real? 21 days and under 5.
Yeah. Carey?
You think around, I don't know, it's low 5, something like that, and I think 23 days. Wow.
And Elisabeth, we're going to you're our panelist with 2 answers here. So please, I guess Visible Man and then SHIRLEY.
I think Invisible Man was 11 million and then about 5 weeks. And SHIRLEY was definitely under 5, but I'm not sure exactly where. And yeah, like probably around 30 days or so.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, that just to give, I think it's helpful for people to have some ballpark of what these are like to put together. Now I want to kind of pull back a little bit and just talk about the journey actually to these projects. And Riz, I know that your career really began with a lot of indie film work and some very well received, from Four Lions to Nightcrawler and on and on. And then The Night Of came along, and Emmy and Time Magazine 100 Most Influential People in the World cover, and suddenly some major studio opportunities, a Bourne movie, a Star Wars movie, Venom for Marvel. And you have said that it was in the aftermath of all of that, sort of the whirlwind of all of that, that you kind of had to pause. There was literally, I think, a physical reaction to so much happening at once. And then you wound up going back to indies, specifically with Sound of Metal, and I think a few others as well. But just, can you take us through your mindset? You've now, in a short amount of time, experienced huge stuff, and you've decided to go back to, as we just established, a pretty low budget grassroots project. What was that all about?
Yeah, well, I guess in some senses it's kind of going back to some of the kind of scale of movie making I was doing for first 10 years or so of my career in the UK. But for me, it felt like going forwards. It felt like going forwards into to kind of try and grow new muscles, and to try and challenge myself a little bit. As we were all going around here talking about how many days it took and the budgets, I'm sure many of us have worked on other projects that have a much bigger budgets and a lot more time, and they're probably in some ways more challenging than these projects that we've done. And I think, having done both, I kind of feel like it's not so much the time or the money that makes something challenging. It's kind of, I guess, a clarity of vision, people being on the same page, and that kind of thing that's difficult to find, which is that chemistry, that alchemy between collaborators. And so for me, I kind of felt like I wanted to go back to work that was maybe a bit more intimate, a bit more character driven, and I guess to try and grow as an actor. And what drew me to these projects was the chemistry with the filmmakers. So with Bassam Tariq for Mogul Mowgli, which is out this year, and then for Sound of Metal, it was with Darius Marder. It was just kind of connecting with them. And I kind of feel like more and more that I feel like I get better work done when I feel connected to the people I'm working with. And it's not that I didn't feel connected on the bigger movies, it's just a hell of a lot more people. So it's harder to have that same depth of connection and that same rapport. So when there's less people, less scale, I think you have more connection, you feel more safe, and then you're able to take more risks.
Yeah. Rachel, I think probably most people know you from all the extraordinary TV work of the last few years, House of Cards, Manhattan, then of course Maisel. But you had done indies in between all of that, and now in this one, it may be, I think, your first film leading role since all of the Maisel madness began. I know that may have been part of the appeal, but I think producing was also part of the appeal. And here you are with a couple, a married couple, Julia Hart, director, Jordan Horowitz, the writer, co-writer. Talk about why those, just the draw of producing and the opportunity to get to do that, I think probably is going to come more easily, in a sense, in an indie, but I know it's not easy. So take it away.
Yeah, it was producing was always something I'd been interested in, and I don't know that I initially thought that this would be an opportunity, but I really owe it to Jordan and Julia, who welcomed me into their incredibly special partnership, obviously in front of or behind the camera and in real life, and taught me an incredible amount. I mean, they are responsible for empowering me into that role in this film, and what an enormous gift. But likewise, what you were saying, Riz, I mean, it's about the people that you're working with. And it was really, I read their beautiful script and had the opportunity to sit down with Julia and talk to her in more detail about this character and about the film and about what they wanted to say with it, and just knew that these were people that I wanted to work with to help bring this story to life.
Yeah. Winston, what an amazing last 3 years. Not that you weren't doing great stuff before, going back to Yale School of Drama and all that, but in the last 3 years, let's just note some huge movies: Black Panther, Avengers Infinity War, Avengers Endgame, one with maybe a bit of a smaller budget than those, but just tremendously acclaimed, Us. And now this film, which is 9 days, a totally different scale, and a first-time feature narrative director. How does somebody like that convince somebody like you to take the ride with him?
Oh, great question. The script really drew me in. So I read the script before I met Edson, and one thing that I always look for is things that allow me to tap into other narratives other than the freebies that come with me. That's usually my race, my size, my gender, right? And 9 days kind of it had nothing to do with that, which means that those things would add additional story to the character. And that was really, really attractive to me. And then I felt like what drew me to the script was what usually draws me to stories that I watch that I like. So when I watch a movie, I love taking a really big journey with, the characters, especially the protagonists. Like I love watching them, climb the mountain, so to say, like go on a large journey where they end up someplace much different than where we met them. And when I read through the script, the character that I played, Will, did that. And I was like, okay, this is amazing. This is good. This is really good. This is really good. And I remembered sitting there for like 30, 40 minutes silence after I read the script, breaking it down in my head and like actually seeing myself as the person and being potentially able to see myself saying the words and being in the moment. And then once I met Edson, it just felt like I could take this really big journey with this guy. Because I recognized how much the movie would take. I recognized how much risking all of it would actually be to kind of go into that character. Because the character really lives in a really dark, emotional state of being for a very long time. And that becomes normalcy. And for me, I always try to put on the character and really have it live inside me. So being in so much emotional distress, and because I'm very vibrant. I'm from the Caribbean, and I'm a warm weather person. You know what I mean? I'm very like coastal city, kind of loud, big. I'm dressed like, Escobar right now, and like that's my personality, and I don't live in those spaces, so I knew it would require a lot of trust. And after meeting Edson, I really, really trusted him. Edson's here, apparently. And he heard me talking. But yeah, I knew I could trust him. We talked about all the things that I like just outside of the film. And I knew that he would be a really good partner to take a journey with.
Nice. Julia, we recently spoke for the Hollywood Reporter podcast, and I thought it was interesting. Last few years, people probably predominantly know you for The Americans and now Ozark, again, the TV work. But you started out at the age of 15 auditioning and doing very indie movies. Some of them had very nice lives, like Martha, Marcy, May, Marlene. But you were talking about the fact that for a long time, casting directors, maybe didn't quite know what to make of you, or they saw you only as sort of eccentric, quirky characters. And we will just note,
I was only cast as like the weird mute or some
right.
sort of pregnant Mormon with immaculate conception.
I was gonna say,
so yeah.
Martha Marcy is you're a girl in a cult, electric children, a religious girl who thinks she's impregnated by a song. We Are What We Are, a cannibal. Grandma, a girl on a road trip with her grandma to get an abortion. So anyway, then there's now to kind of your decision since Ozark and everything. Was the decision to do something like The Assistant just, I want to do something completely different from what people have now spent the last few years seeing me do? I think that was part of it, right?
Yeah, well, I'm just going to go back. I mean, what everybody was saying, the reason why they did independent film again was, kind of a similar place that I was at, where, that's how I that's where my roots come from. And it just, it felt, Kitty Green, I was such a fan of hers before. She's such a talented director. Casting John Bonet is such a great film. So, I just really wanted to work with her, and, the writing in the assistant was just great. And I feel like it always comes down to the writing, and yeah, you can do a lot with really, really great writing. So.
Mm-hmm. Vanessa, obviously, I guess, it's a situation where there's a TV part where a lot of people, maybe most people discovered you through The Crown. Wonderful work there. And then, of course, those last few years, some very big movies, The Mission Impossible and Hobbs and Shaw and all of that. What was the thing that makes you say, at a moment when you probably have more choice than you've ever had in your career, I'm going to go put myself through the grinder to do a low budget, emotionally grueling part like this? Take us through your thought process.
Well, I think it's what everyone said really, and what Riza said too about, I think when you have like a finite amount of resources and you have a smaller group of people, and you know that you have less days than you would need or want, there's this kind of like immediacy to it. There's a kind of visceralness to knowing that we have to get this done, and there's a sort of I like the sort of impulsiveness, and also that tribal quality. I mean, I sort of started off in theatre for so many years, and I always feel like independent movies have that feeling of everyone a kind of really egalitarian, family that come together to express whatever you need to. And I also think that sometimes the fewer days or the intensity means that I found that you take risks that perhaps you wouldn't. And then in Pieces of a Woman, even us kind of sitting down and being like, we want to do this birth in one take with no cuts, and how the hell do we do that? And we've only got this amount of days, and will it be possible? And you kind of all hold hands together and just hope for the best. And it's like permission to fail somehow, because so there's a small group of people.
I just want people to know that what you're talking about, if they haven't seen the movie yet, 30 minutes before the opening credits, even 30 minutes, one shot or one continuous take of a woman going into birth, and then what happens after that. I mean, it's insane. And so we'll talk more about that, but sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt if you wanted to say anything else.
No.
Okay. Elisabeth, you are the queen of peak TV. Let's just talk about West Wing, Mad Men, Top of the Lake, Handmaid's Tale. It is just unbelievable how many great things you've been a part of. But before and between, there's always been indies. Girl Interrupted, Virgin, Meadowland, all of your stuff with Alex Ross Perry, most recently Her Smell, and then these two 2020 films. What keeps you, coming back to indie films during, I assume, hiatuses and stuff, when you could be relaxing and you don't have to do this? What's the why?
I mean, it's not really by super design. It's not like I'm like turning down Wonder Woman or anything. It's just I don't know. It's just always where people have seen me, and it's always been the projects that I've gotten and been sent my way. It's by no sort of real choice at all, except that I think the kind of work that I gravitate towards and the kind of characters I gravitate towards tend to be a little bit more an independent film than studio film. I don't think I've ever I think Invisible Man is like the first like studio film I've done, especially lead role. And even that was like, it was like an indie studio film. So yeah, I don't know. I guess it's just the kind of characters I like to play are often very weird. They're often on this like stranger side. So it's just always been what I've gravitated towards. I've never really gone like, oh, I'm now going to do an indie film, or I'm now going to do television, or I'm now going to do a studio film. It's always just been about the material that's come my way, and purely picking on whatever's the best writing, whether it's, a feature director that no one's really ever heard of before. Like my first movie with Alex, like it wasn't his first movie, but it was his first movie that he'd made with real actors. And I wasn't afraid of that. And I don't know, I just always go towards whatever's the best material. Even with The Invisible Man, when they sent that to me, I was like, first of all, I don't understand what's going on. This seems to be a studio film. You sent it to the wrong email. And then I read it and I was like, oh, got it, cool. This makes more sense. Now I see why you think I could do this.
And then and SHIRLEY came along. Just what's the origin story there?
This is Ethel, by the way. SHIRLEY was one that I really, really wanted. It was one of the best scripts that I'd ever read. written by a woman named Sarah Gubbins, was incredible. And an offer was out to another actress, a spectacular actress who I very much admire. And I was like, if she doesn't want it, still here, happy to jump in. Luckily, she passed and I got it. I was so excited.
Very nice. Well, Carey, I think it's been 11 years since An Education, where most of us saw you for maybe the first time. And I just want to list, it's incredible in that time period. Never Let Me Go, Drive, Shame, Inside Llewyn Davis, Far From the Madding Crowd, Mudbound, Wildlife, and now this great new project. It seems like maybe in that period, I think the only time that you did a studio movie would have been Gatsby. And I think that you have said that it was obviously a very different kind of experience. Doesn't mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it seems like you, again, return to and thrive in the kind of art house movies of the sort that I've just mentioned. Talk us through your thought process and how you wind up with an actress who, I guess, Vanessa, actress / filmmaker now, writer and director, who I imagine Vanessa might know, because I think she was also involved with the Crown, Emerald, Fennel. So just your journey to this point.
Hi, Vanessa. We do actually know each other, obviously, because we're in England. We all know each other. I guess An Education happened, and that was a film that I thought like maybe 15 people might see at the Curzon in London, and then it turned into this thing that afforded these opportunities. And my agent, who's been my agent since I was 18, Tor Belfridge, said, you're in this very rare moment, and it'll pass, but you should take advantage of it. And so if you are offered something and you can imagine somebody else doing it and that's sitting well with you, then you shouldn't do it. So that sort of just became the way of working from then on. It was sort of, if I could picture somebody else doing it and think, oh, that would be all right if I saw the trailer and another actor was doing it, it wouldn't bother me, then I wouldn't. So that sort of became the benchmark, and just those projects ended up being the ones that I just couldn't bear the idea of anyone else doing. And so that became the sort of process for choosing that. And I think my whole career has been an attempt to recreate summer camp, because I was the child at summer camp that would cry on the last day, really, like, so much, because I couldn't bear everyone breaking up. And I feel like that's so much of filmmaking, is like that feeling of, sort of becoming everyone's best mate in 5 weeks. And then, so I think that was the attraction. And Emerald is just, she's extraordinary. And it was her first feature, but I think you just have to spend 5 minutes with her to know that she was going to smash it. So I feel very lucky to have met her.
Thank you. Andy, most of us discovered you, obviously, I would imagine, through SNL, which the more I kind of think about it, there is a real indie sensibility to that, where not huge budgets from what I understand each week, not a lot of shooting time or prep time. And then I guess Lauren's famous saying is, the show doesn't go on because it's ready, it goes on because it's 11:30. And then even within that indie framework, you and your friends and collaborators, the Lonely Island guys, sort of carved out a niche of your own with these digital shorts that you made, from Dick in a Box to the Emmy-winning Dick in a Box to many others. Of course. So just like, obviously there's something in you that likes the grassroots kind of approach things. Was here at Palm Springs, it's a first time feature writer and director, separate people. How did you and your Lonely Island guys wind up involved with this?
Well, it was sent to me and I liked the script. I mean, I don't want to say the same thing everyone else said, but I kind of feel like it really is the truth. If you're going to act in something, you have to really love the material and see yourself in it and believe you can do it justice. And this was an instance where I could. And I was in a very lucky position that we were able to also come on as producers and help lend our run and gun expertise, having done, so many hundreds of things with no money before. we have a lot of tricks up our sleeve in that regard, and I knew I could protect my performance in the edit. So that ticked all the boxes for me.
So all of these films were in the can, obviously, by the time the pandemic really blew up in March. But I think it's interesting how some of them play maybe differently given the world into which they are coming. And I just wonder if you feel that it may have affected, or may, for movies that are still, rolling out, how it may affect the viewer experience. And obviously, people can overanalyze things and often do in my profession, but I'm just going to prod a couple of the comments that have been made, and anything you may want to add to this. I mean, Elisabeth, people are saying you were fighting the invisible enemy before any of us this year with the Invisible Man. Is there a subtext to the film that maybe you think people are reading into or hearing, that you've heard feedback about since then in the case of Invisible Man?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of what we do with everything, right? I mean, we tend to kind of, whenever we see it, whenever we happen to come across it, like Shirley I made actually the year before last. We actually made it 2 years ago. And yet there's sort of relevance there as far as somebody who can't leave the house. I think whenever we watch something, we tend to find whatever it is. I mean, I've seen most of the films you guys are talking about today, and I think that's what we do with art, right? We try to kind of find what we see of ourselves or people we know in it. So I definitely see that there's a lot of applying, I think, in work that we've done, and I'm sure work that everyone is putting together now or about to go work on. I'm sure everyone's kind of then now taking whatever experience you've had or seen people go through in the last 6-8 months and applying that. I mean, that's kind of the job. It's kind of what we do, right?
Yeah. And talking about, forced isolation, I think, Rachel, your film is dealing with that. You're stuck with a baby on the run. You can't even have your neighbor over for a nice meal without some dramatics. That was another one that's come up. Andy, the idea that everything is the same and nothing matters. Winston, I guess this gets a little darker, but I mean, really, from what I understand, the subtext, it's not necessarily spelled out, but what inspired Edson to kind of write this kind of a story, and that I think it's sort of implied that there is depression, suicide underlying what your character is dealing with, and another character as well. I guess, there's not really anything that I need, unless somebody wants to respond. I just wanted to point out, it's kind of been interesting to read everyone's take as they consume these via, for the most part, streaming services since the pandemic, that there's that. But, another common theme among the panel that we have here is, a number of these speak to the Me Too moment that hopefully it's not a moment, but just the last several years since 2017. And, this is something I think is also kind of maybe interesting to discuss while we've got a bunch of people from this business all together. Just Julia, I mean, your character is literally named Jane after apparently Jane Doe, who has been the way we've referred to a lot of survivors of what's gone on in this business. Your character is playing someone who is around a lot of stuff that we've all since read about, hopefully not experienced directly. Just, this is not something that's going to be addressed in a big studio movie in all likelihood. Was that part of, was it important to you to kind of, was that a story that you felt needed to be told for that, partly that reason?
Yes, and it was the first and only script that I've seen talking about it. But the thing that I love, I really loved why the assistant, how it was told was, Jane is not the one who's getting sexually assaulted, but there is, the movie isn't just about sexual abuse. It's about abuse in general, and about culture in a workspace or in general, and how toxic it is, and how she was a victim as well. You know, because when you do have yes culture, everybody's just walking around on tiptoes and they're just so scared to do anything, you know, because in the end of the day, she wants to work just like everyone else. And that needs to, and I feel that's still going on, you know, is that sort of yes culture. So that's also a reason why I felt this story was really important. Yeah.
Carey, this is the first movie, yours, I think, that's sort of been able to approach this subject matter from sort of a Black comedy perspective. It's obviously not making light of what's gone on, but it's using that as a way in to tackle what is obviously a issue that goes far beyond the film industry. It's all over this society, unfortunately. And I guess I just wonder, you know, what it seems like that for you and for Emerald, that was something that was important. And you know, even just stepping back for a second, I think about an education. Again, we're only 11 years removed from that. It's a story of a underage girl basically being courted by a much older guy. I don't even know if that movie would be made today. So just how things have changed even in the course of your career leading to this project, I'd be curious your take on.
Yeah, I guess that's probably true. Yeah, I think the you know, Emerald's sort of endeavor was a kind of, she described it as a sort of Neapolitan ice cream that's poisonous. So you see this thing and it looks sort of kind of quite pretty and fun. There's a Britney Spears soundtrack, and then by the time you realize what's happening, it's sort of, you realize it's a very different film. But and I think that it's so purposeful to try and tell the story in that way, and to inject humor where it works. And of course it's all very sensitive, but I think I think what we've discussed so much in the run-up to making this film is that, yes, there is the Me Too movement, which goes on, and the progress that's been made is great, and there's, as Julia said, so much more to do. But these are really conversations that have been going on for millennia. Women have been talking about this forever, and so now these stories are coming out. That's, you know, it's fantastic to you know, make a platform for that and to do it in different ways. And I think it's so great that there are multiple films even within this panel that are talking about it, just and offering different ideas, and it's all conversation, isn't it? And none of it. And what's great about these films, and I haven't had the chance to see The Assistant yet, and I'm so looking forward to it. I read so many great things about it, but what it seems to do is it's not didactic. None of these things tell you how to feel. They're asking you to go home and have a fight about it, or, you know, or go and have a long conversation over a coffee. And that's sort of the hope, I think, with Something a Woman as well, is that it just continues.
Well, and I think it's also interesting, Elisabeth, with The Invisible Man, that the difference between this and the prior incarnations is that we are experiencing it through the prism of not the invisible man, but through the woman who's being essentially mistreated by the man, not believed, sort of dismissed as hysterical, told that it's all in her head. You know, again, we can overly read into things, but I got the sense from things that Lee, your director, said, and others that may have actually been something you were thinking about. It's not a coincidence.
Oh yeah, no, it's pretty overt. I don't think we were being too subtle at all about it. And that was all, you know, that was Lee, the writer director's idea. They asked him what he would do with The Invisible Man, and he said, I would tell it from the perspective of the woman, of the victim. And so he gets a lot of credit for that idea. And obviously Universal gets credit and Blumhouse for going, yeah, that's a great idea. And then he was incredible with, and really, really generous with including me in that conversation, and, you know, working on certain things with him on the script that had to do with her abuse and had to do with her history and her reaction to that, and who she would be now, and what that kind of relationship would be like. He basically was like, I need you to help me tell this story. Like, I'm not going to try to speak for a perspective that I don't have. And so he was incredibly, as he should be. I mean, it's exactly what he should have done, but he was very generous in that, and really helped really allowed me to help tell that story in like the most honest way I felt within this kind of context of this, you know, Invisible Man reboot, you know, Universal film, but also try to make it kind of as honest a story as possible about what that abuse may have been and what the recovery may or may not have been.
Mm-hmm. And this, I guess, this idea of just reframing things that we've all been looking at for many years, but now kind of looking at it from a different perspective. Rachel, I know that was the intention of Julia Hart as well with, you know, I think she said the inspiration were, you know, a lot of these 70s kind of gritty movies, but the way that she put it, I think essentially was that, you know, the woman was generally in those movies to show what was at stake for the man. Now we are going to show that woman's story front and center in your film.
Said it so beautifully that as someone who grew up a fan of that 70s crime thriller genre, that she would watch these incredible actresses like Tuesday Weld and Thief play these really interesting, fully realized women who disappeared 15 minutes into the movie when we started following the men into the action. And she found herself wondering what happened to them. You know, they had come in with these really interesting stories, and that was certainly one of the inspirations for this film was if Tuesday Weld were to be followed instead of the man in the film, what might that look like, and what might her life look like? And what you have with I'm Your Woman is a portrait of a woman who largely has always considered herself someone's wife, and someone who wanted that life for herself, and is forced to confront a brand new reality and redefine what womanhood means to her through this new lens. And it was really special to be a part of a movie. I also love those movies and grew up loving those movies. It's really special to be a part of a film with a woman at the helm helping redefine that genre. And as I said, a woman who included me in that process, and a wonderful man, Jordan Horowitz, who loves women and believes in putting them to the forefront and unpacking these stories that we love and are so familiar with, and figuring out how we can tell them in a new way.
Let's talk about some of the specific challenges that you all had to endure to kind of bring these performances to life. Riz, so much work went on for months and months and months before the cameras even rolled in your film. Can you talk about just the incredible skill sets, multiple, that you had to acquire in order to give the performance at all? And then also, and, you know, to say nothing of the physical transformation, all of that stuff, but just what work went into it before things started on set?
Yeah, so the character I play, Ruben, is a drummer, and he plays the drums in a punk band, and he loses his hearing, and then starts to he's forced to reimagine who he is, and enters a new community, which is the deaf community. And so I guess for the role, I had to learn how to play the drums. I don't play the drums. And I also had to learn American Sign Language. And so that was a daily thing, a few hours every day, learning the drums and learning sign language. My drum teacher, Guy Licata, my sign instructor, Jeremy Stone, who's also in the movie. And we actually named the character after Jeremy, and we gave him his surname Stone. It was a challenge, but I think, at least speaking personally, I don't know if this is true for you guys as well, is often the challenges are the real gifts, of these roles. It's such a privilege to be able to learn the drums, and to develop those skills. And similarly with sign language, it was daunting, it was scary, it was often frustrating and difficult, but ultimately I found it really, really enriching. I found they were both essentially kinds of nonverbal communication, drumming and sign language. And so for me personally, as someone who's often quite verbose, and I'm a rapper and I can hide behind words a lot, this was something that really opened me up physically in a new way. And also just the connections that I and Darius and so much of the hearing cast and crew was able to make with the deaf community, all the deaf actors, that was very enriching. And sadly, we live in a very segregated society between hearing and deaf culture. And so to be able to be invited into deaf culture and be immersed in that for 7 months prior to shooting was just a tremendous privilege and a gift.
Absolutely. Winston, can you explain what the Alexander technique is and how this factored so much into your characterization here? This was interesting to read about. You're just on mute, Winston. You may want to click that. Yeah.
Yeah, the Alexander technique is a technique about posturing and how your spinal alignment helps you to do things with less effort and have more effectiveness in whatever you're doing. You're able to breathe better because your brain can get more oxygen and different things like that. And you just have more of corporality with your person, with your body, which was really important for me for the characterization of Will, who is a man who is going to try to do the least that he has to do to accomplish the most, because, everything reminds him of living. And a bit of the trap with Will is the idea of playing I don't want to be here instead of playing what he actually does want, which is to have a new start and live and redefine what living means. He doesn't want to experience the fatigue and pain and hardship of what life is. He's the funniest thing, which might be the only funny thing about 9 days, is that I thought that, the idea of being quarantined in a house by myself, watching the lives of different people through small TVs and small TV screens, and really living this myopic existence was over after we shot. I really thought that was it. I thought that, I would be able to shed that character and go back to regular life. And within 6 months, we were back at it. And, I remember you said something there about the invisible man around all of us. And it's I've kind of ended up being back in the space of Will and having to, as Winston Duke, find really creative ways to exist in this world that I'm in now in quarantine again. Because, just like traps with Will, there are traps while being in this quarantine, being burdened by that fatigue is a real challenge day to day. Being burdened by what feels like the ugliness of life is a challenge every day. In the last 9 months, I've watched a man die in 7 minutes being choked on screen, and watched it over and over and over again. I've suffered, losses in family, losses in close friends, and had to still try to find and ground myself in the fact that it's really beautiful to just be alive. That when I shed all the things that I think are important, which, all these distractions, the thing that is really beautiful is a walk, is to go out and see people, is to have conversations and connect with people, is to go for a bike ride, is to go to the beach and see a sunset and smell things and taste things and sleep and wake up. And yeah, it's been something that's been challenging, but finding that has been its own thing. And while I was playing Will, that Alexander technique thing, it was really to figure out how to find what Will wants and live within the wants that he has, which is a new day, which is finding, the love for the moment and the love for being present without it hurting too much. And then accepting that being able to be hurt is also part of the pleasure of being here, so yeah.
Yeah. And I think that, just listening to you speak about it and having recently seen the movie, I guess another odd thing that's now replicated in real life is that people aren't really able to grieve the way we normally would. Somebody passes away, you can't go to a funeral or memorial service or whatever. So, it's sort of stuck like this character in a bad place for a lot of people.
For a long time. I think what's really crazy about the here and now is that the trauma and the realization of the trauma is happening at the same time. Usually something happens to you, you are busy or you're like fighting to move on really quickly. And then later down the line, you realize that had a really big impact on you. But day to day, you're like, this is having a really big impact on me. And my life is slowed down to such a pace where I can see it and I can feel it and I know something's wrong. So it's all these things that are happening at the same time, which is changing the here and now. And that's kind of, it feels like that's never really happened before, Well,
and I guess for some people, the work here is what allows them to work through these kinds of, grief and tough things that happen in life. I mean, I think Vanessa, to some extent, you and Shia LaBeouf are playing to some extent the life experience of your director and writer, who are a couple who have been through similar things. And I guess I just wonder, generally, is that, that must have been a heavy mindset to live within for a while, but also then, let's come back to that incredible opening sequence of 30 minutes of a pregnancy basically going wrong, which is, or a birth going wrong. And all of the different emotions you have to hit within that 30 minutes. I don't know if that's something you literally map out. All right, at 21 minutes and 30 seconds, I have to now, how that works with blocking and all of that. Anyway, please.
Well, yeah, firstly, I mean, I definitely, when I first kind of read the script, I knew, like everyone else is saying, when you read something and you go, oh, I haven't, this touches me so deeply. I haven't seen this on screen before. And it was such a gift that it was even an attempt to put it on screen, and to sort of, the more women that I spoke to had been through it and had lost children in that way, or very similar ways, or lost anyone, as Winston was saying, the more I realized that we had a kind of a duty to honor those stories. And so it was a kind of a very similar situation with Connor and Kata. But the actual birth was, yeah, I mean, how do we do it? I don't even know, it was such a blur. We had 2 days of rehearsal, and we'd kind of done, I mean, I haven't given birth myself, and I just knew that my big responsibility was sort of to show like the messiness, and everything I saw, every documentary, it was all like edited and filtered, and it was kind of sanitized. And I thought, God, we've seen death so much on screen, but we haven't really seen birth, like sort of in all its kind of, messiness is the best way to describe it. So we had this amazing birth consultant called Alana McAllister. We flew over from Portland really last minute, and we had 2 days, and we were like in a huddle in this flat, and we knew that we had to get to certain points, but we didn't really know totally what we might be saying or what might happen. It was almost like a dance, really. And we didn't know how long it was going to be. We thought it could be an hour. We had no idea. We knew we had to get to different rooms and what kind of happened there. But other than that, it was just this incredible, exhilarating ride where Molly Parker, Shire, and I action happened, and we just started and hoped for the best. And Benjamin Loeb, the DOP, he had this gimbal, so he was just with us on the floor the whole time, the whole movie actually, because we did 4 takes the first day, 2 takes the second day, and it kind of set the language of the movie. And we want it to be a bit like Saving Private Ryan, that you kind of like, you experience this trauma with these people, so that the fallout from it, you kind of feel like you're living it with them, or else I felt that you'd be a bit distant from them and kind of observing them. So that was really important to us, the kind of viscerality of that. Yeah,
and it's interesting. I'm going to say something only because I know they're publicly discussing this, and it's been a big thing lately. But a lot of people have been reading about what's, John Legend and Chrissy Teigen just had a birth go wrong. And, there was some backlash. How, why are you sharing photos or writing about this and whatever? And it sparked a pretty interesting back and forth discussion about, people don't, for whatever reason, talk about this. And so it is for a lot of people shocking to, I think your film and the performance, is an extension of what they're doing, which is, why is this stigma? Why is this something that it's not acceptable to, deal with out in the light? So anyway, I think it's really interesting topic. I want to ask Andy about the fact, just when these are was your film, I'm assuming for probably nobody, it was shot in sequence, but let me just start with Andy. Your film, I'm guessing, is all over the place, right? Like it usually is. So for your character who starts out as the most nihilistic guy, and then, spoiler alert, comes to care about another person, and it's done very subtly with kind of gradations along the way, very, you don't, there's not like one aha moment where he suddenly starts to give a damn about life. When you're doing something out of sequence, and that kind of a subtle thing has to happen over the course of the whole movie, have you figured out a way to do that effectively? I'm sure everybody has their own technique, but I'm just wondering, how do you map it out?
I know Milioti did a little bit. She mapped it out for herself. For me, I was so involved in the prep and in the rewriting and stuff, I just really knew the script well. But certainly everyone from top to bottom in every position had to really know it, because we were shooting so fast. So it would be like, also it's a time loop movie, so we're shooting the same locations all in a row, because then you lose the location. So you have like a checklist, and you go, now you don't care. Let's do 3 takes of that. Okay, take a beat. We don't have it. Okay, now you do care. And you really just rely on each other a lot. And we wouldn't note each other, but we'd remind each other, like, I feel like maybe we could do this more like this, and oftentimes when you're in the trenches like that together, it's that summer camp thing, you have to put your faith and your trust in everyone you're working with. And when you do that, it allows everyone is each other's safety net. So there's no like, I can't believe they just said that to me. Like everyone their voice is important, because everyone might think of the thing that saves the fucking movie in that moment. Like, oh my God, thank God that one dude in props mentioned, like, I thought that was supposed to be the blue one or whatever, you're like, oh my God, it ruined the whole movie. In our case, it was very much like a house of cards in terms of all the time loopiness, where every little thing did kind of matter if you choose to care to like look at all the little details. Andy Ciara, the writer, really went out of his way to make sure that was the case. So yeah, it was just everyone being professional and caring a lot and being happy to be there making it.
Yeah. Carey, this may sound like a silly question, but I have heard so many actors say that like one of the hardest things to do convincingly is to play drunk. And your character is acting drunk. So you are acting as a person who is acting. And just take me, like, what's the secret?
That was my get out of jail free card, is that she's not actually drunk. So I could do really bad drunk acting and get away with it because she's pretending. But yeah, that was the most intimidating thing about the script, was playing. That's when I read it, I thought, oh, it's excruciating, and in front of such lovely people, and looking so awful. But yeah, I didn't have to be good, and that was and often I think that is the best thing a director can ever say to you, is don't try. Paul Dano said that to me on Wildlife in the scene where I am supposed to be very, very drunk, and he said, stop trying to act well, just sort of play. And it was so freeing. But yeah, drunk acting is impossibly hard, and I'll never be good at it. I
wanted to ask Julia about a kind of polar opposite challenge, which I know to some extent was also something Vanessa was up against, which is your character, probably total dialogue does not add up to more than a page or two, I would guess. I mean, this is like a silent movie in the best sense. I mean, it's incredible how much you do with, you know, a little facial tick or posture or gesture or whatever. But when you were sitting down, seeing what you were going to be asked to do on this movie, was that part of the appeal, or was that scary as hell, or what?
It was everything. I mean, I whenever anything's a challenge, I'm like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to, but I want to do it. So that's just how I am. So, but yeah, I think what was really important was that Kitty Green, she made it very clear that she wanted this to be a quiet movie, but, you know, and it makes a lot of sense because the subject is so loud. So having that contradiction is really interesting. But that being said, like I really wanted to make sure to separate the audience and Jane, you know, have that big so the audience will feel what Jane is feeling, which is that isolation, you know, because Jane feels isolated and alone. So yes, I feel that it was very necessary not to have a lot of talking because everything was just so tense and bottling up, and it's like a ticking time bomb. But it was really intimidating because I'm like, how can I make photocopying like interesting but not looking like I'm like acting, you know? So yeah, it definitely had its challenges, but yeah.
And you know, I guess with indies well, I think with probably almost all movies now, you don't really have generally rehearsal time or time with your castmate, very rarely. Yeah. But Vanessa, I wanted to go. Yeah, I think Winston, I heard you guys had a bit of it, and I want to ask you about that in 1 sec. And then also Vanessa, though, you talk about you guys hung out at Ellen Burstyn's place. Like that's a cool way to do it. What was that? The value of that?
Well, it was, yeah, we were so thrilled that she came on board, and we went to meet her. And I remember Shari and I were going up in a lift, and Shari got her a pot plant to just I don't know, just to say hi. And we walked into her flat, and she was just instantly like such a like formidable presence, but also so kind. I had a couple of sleepovers at her house because, you know, we were playing mother and daughter, and I knew that I had to get to know her really well. So that was quite surreal. And you know, you walk past all her awards and you're just like, oh my God. But yeah, she was just wonderful. And you know, we kind of felt quite familial really early on.
And similarly, Winston, I mean, you also come from a theater background. Is rehearsal something you wish you could, like, you know, talk about what happened with 9 days, but is it also something that, you know, people should, you know, do what they have to find the resources to make it possible more often? Does it really add value? It's money well spent if that can be afforded to the actors.
I think it's probably going to be project by project. So it's so far. Let's see, Black Panther had a pretty big rehearsal process. We rehearsed pretty much everything and worked on the script and worked on fights and all these things. So Lupita and I did have a short rehearsal process for us. So that really helped in kind of establishing relationship with the family, especially the kids who were all pretty new. So just developing a relationship and a shorthand with them was something that really came in handy on the days of the shoot when we finally started going. You know, Elisabeth and I didn't meet and scare each other or anything beforehand. But with 9 days, we had maybe about a week and a half to 2 weeks. I showed up like 2 weeks before that to just start working with Edson because we had so much to do. Honestly, I didn't know if we could do this movie until we finished. Every single day I would wake up and say, how are we going to finish, you know, these 9 pages of dialogue today, and we would get it done. And there was really little wiggle room. So luckily we didn't ever have anyone like, you know, struggling with lines or anything on any given day, which we got that from the rehearsals. Like we worked through a lot of the things, created kind of like a shorthand and a lexicon for the world building that is 9 days. Because that's one of the specific special things about that piece was building this spirit world existence, right? This world that we didn't really have very many rules. So we had to create the rules for ourselves. So, you know, the spirits, when they're coming for interviews, were new to cognitive thought, but it wasn't like, wow, that's a curtain. Oh my God, that's a table. Is this liquid? What is, you know? So we had to kind of create the rules with everyone. And then we got a chance to do that. And that helped us create the trust that we could kind of call upon every single day on set. And our schedule was one of, we would start on whatever hour that day, and then the next day we would start 2 hours later. So by the end of the week, we were wrapping at 9 in the morning after starting at 6 in the morning on the first day of the week. Wow. Right? So like we would run the full gamut. So you were never sleeping at any kind of recognizable hour for your body. Your body was always just, you know, cortisol heavy. And yeah, so that rehearsal, especially for 9 days, came in, I would say, more handy than any other rehearsal process that I had before for anything I've ever done, because we had so many challenges, and that's kind of the indie world on this film is you kind of had to, everyone had a vested interest in the movie actually working and kind of being accomplished day to day. So like we all had to like just trust.
Yeah. Well, you know, to stay on that point for a second, you know, we've established, Vanessa, you and Shia had some time to get to know each other and figure that out. This was obviously going to be a very complex relationship you guys were going to portray. I don't know if you'd ever crossed paths even before that. I want to ask Riz and Andy, who are also in these movies where it's centering on, you know, some very intense relationships of one sort or another. Did you have any time to get to know the person who you're, I mean, do you usually? It just feels like for a non-actor, do you really truly just get thrown in with somebody like that or did you guys in your cases have an opportunity to, you know, work with Kristen, Andy, or Olivia, I believe, Riz? Andy, you can go first if you like.
Okay. We had like a general meeting at our office, and we have mutual friends and stuff. So it started off just because I had seen her in a bunch of stuff consecutively, and she was incredible in them. And I was like, who is this? She's so good. So she came in and we kind of just hit it off, and I realized she loved comedy as well as having dramatic chops, which was exactly what we were looking for, as somebody to counterbalance my vibe, and kind of ground it while also being able to really cut loose and be a lunatic, which she can also do. So we were already kind of like thinking of her for it. And then when we officially took the script on at the company, we asked her, and she was thankfully excited about it. And, you know, we rehearsed one day, and there's a big dance sequence in it. So we rehearsed that a couple times for like a few hours. But it's a crapshoot, you know, especially when it's like, you know, our movie is a sort of blend of genres, but it's got the structural backbone of a rom-com. And whether or not there's like chemistry that people buy in that is, you never know going in. It could be a disaster. You could end up on the third day realizing that one of the people hates each other or both, or, you know, that's when you really find out if you're good at acting. Luckily, I didn't have to. We were just friends immediately, and it was super fun. So I think, you know, I attribute it to that, mostly luck, and that she's really good at acting.
Riz, did you have a similar?
Just start off by saying, I don't know if anyone else has seen Palm Springs, but I loved it. Amazing. It's hilarious. I mean, just check it out. It might be a welcome balm to like some of the heaviness of everyone else's films.
Yeah.
I can't. But it's a beautiful film and hilarious. Anyway, we didn't have rehearsals because Darius Mardo, our director, is a bit of a lunatic, which is what drew us to him, and he wanted everything to be super spontaneous, which is the reason why we had to, I had to learn to play the drums for real, and Olivia Cook had to learn to play the guitar, use the loop pedal, and do that very particular kind of punk metal screaming, which is its own kind of athleticism. We had to learn it for real because he wanted us to play a gig for real, at a club in Boston with a crowd and come on and play it as a band. So the one thing we did have was band practice. So we did that, thankfully. But we didn't have any rehearsals. And similarly, I think, again, the reason why he wanted me to learn sign language is because he wanted to leave a looseness in the filmmaking so that we were kind of improvising in sign language and really communicating. So he was quite like an anti-rehearsal person. Whereas for me, I like the idea of rehearsal, but I'm quite glad he took that, for me at least, it was a crutch away from me, because then I think the whole thing did feel a bit more messy, like you were saying, Vanessa, and spontaneous.
Yeah. So we have about 2 minutes, and I just want to point out a couple of quick things that I don't know if we're going to have opportunity to, if anyone wants to quickly interject something, but just to make some points here. Half of you guys are here for films directed by female directors. Rachel by Julia Hart, Julia by Kitty Green, Elisabeth, in the case of Shirley, by Josephine Decker, and Carey by Emerald Fennell. I'm not sure there's been a year in which 4 studio movies have been directed by women. So I think that's one other thing to say for indie films, that people are given opportunities to, they're more, maybe people could learn from that at studios. Also, I think it's interesting, a few of them, I guess Lee Wannell, Elisabeth is also an actor, and in Carey's case, Emerald, and I believe one of your producers is Margot Robbie. So some other just interesting, you talk about producing here, and we've also said Rachel and Andy and Elisabeth, I believe, we're all producers on at least. And I think Carey as well. And anyway, it's seems like that's just worth noting. And then I just want to also close by talking about the importance of film festivals for indie films, without which, I mean, it's hard enough now with theaters in the situation they're in, but Sundance was Palm Springs, 9 Days, Promising Young Woman, and SHIRLEY, Invisible Man went straight to theaters. Julia had The Assistant at Telluride last year, and I know is a fan of Telluride, as is pretty much anyone who's ever been there. And then that was also at Sundance this year. Riz, Sound of Metal, was at TIFF in 2019. Pieces of a Woman was at Venice last month, where Vanessa was named Best Actress of the festival. And Rachel just opened AFI Fest with I'm Your Woman. So I guess maybe that's the most appropriate place to kind of wind down, is just if anybody wants to speak about the, for movies that are not easily marketed and, there can be a 1-sentence log line or something or it's a remake or a sequel, just if you can share any quick takeaway about the importance of the film festival for indie films that you've been a part of. Elisabeth, I'll invite you to jump first.
I mean, almost every single movie I've done has started by being at a festival. I think Invisible Man's like one of like maybe 2 or 3 that I've done that have actually just gone to theaters and that people have seen. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have any sort of career whatsoever without 1, television, and 2, film festivals. So for me, I mean, yeah, it's also just such an incredible opportunity for so many different kinds of films from so many different countries and so many different kinds of filmmakers, and giving that opportunity to different kinds of stories and representation. And yeah, I wouldn't be here without it. So
anybody else want to just interject? I mean, I guess, just to cover our bases, Telluride, why is Telluride so great, Julia, if people haven't experienced it?
I've never been
I'm
to
sorry.
Telluride.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I was like, wait, am I on mute? Why is Telluride great? Sorry. There was just a knock on my door, so I apologize.
Okay. No problem.
What was the question again? I'm
Yeah,
so
just,
sorry.
I mean, we've talked about Telluride as kind of a special experience. What is it that for you made it that?
It's really special just because it's purely like movies. I mean, as great as, you know, meeting all sorts of people and press is in its own way, it's you know, I love it. I saw like 3 movies a day, and I mean, I can watch movies all day, and it's really just going there. It's not that all the festivals are like this, but you know, you're so busy at festivals, and when you're at Telluride, they really encourage you to watch as much as possible, basically. So I just, and it's just a beautiful town, and it looks like, I mean, it looks like a Western, and
Yeah.
I don't know, the whole vibe of it is just like really amazing. But I will say, like what Elisabeth was saying, about that's how, you know, I got my start, was also at festivals too, and I mean, I guess the first time I even like saw myself on screen, like at a premiere, was at Sundance. Like, I didn't know, you know, I was so naive, and I was like, what's this? But it was so exciting, you know, and film festivals are always so exciting, and you just meet so many incredible people, and yeah, it's a nice reminder in a way, where it's like, oh, this is why I love what I do, you know, and it's very inspiring to see. I mean, this is even inspiring, sitting and talking with all of you guys. I mean, it's yeah. I mean, I'm just like very excited. I'm not gonna lie. I was a little nervous. I was like, but yeah. So it's same with the film festival. So
Nice. And Andy, you must have had a nice time at Sundance. Your movie sold for more than any movie has ever sold at Sundance, by 69
Casual.
cents. That was fun touch there. Anything you'd say about that?
Yeah, we added the 69 cents so everyone wouldn't hate us. I don't know. It was, you never know. You just make stuff and hope. And going in, I was like, I just hope we sell it. Like, I just don't want this to be a massive failure that I'm humiliated by. Every decision I make is based on not being humiliated. That's kind of more the comedy approach, I guess. Like, how can I angle this so that I don't feel humiliated when this is over? But yeah, I mean, it went great. You know, I think we were fortunate that there's a lot of fun in our movie, and I think it stuck out a little bit because the world is in such a toilet right now that it kind of, you know, there's really incredible, important work being made, and I'm so grateful that it exists, and it's so like, it's starting conversations that are important, and that's what we made, was a little more to take your mind off it for a second and feel good and think about things too. But you know, you leave having a different conversation maybe than some of the really heavy stuff that's about like what is wrong with our earth. So
and yeah,
I think that helped. Yeah, but I mean, I had a great time at Sundance. First time I ever went to Sundance was with my college girlfriend, whose short film got into the shorts program. So I got to go, and it was like the year that like Wet Hot American Summer was there, and it was just the coolest. Now it's a little heavy. Like when you go there with a movie, I'm sure you guys know this, there's so much press. It's intense. I really miss being able to just like go watch 10 movies in 3 days. That was, to me, the experience I really loved. So if I ever get to go back, I'll try and stay longer.
Go to Telluride.
Yeah,
that's like Telluride. It's amazing.
Yeah. And nobody bothers you there because it's so freaking far out of the way that it's even Clooney's like, and Bill Gates this year was there, or this past year was there. He's like, I've never been able to walk around like this. It's great.
I sat in a gondola the year that we went with Never Let Me Go. I sat in a gondola with someone who'd just seen Never Let Me Go and was tearing it to pieces.
Oh no!
In front of me. They were just so comfortable with the whole thing, and I just had to sit there on my own and take it.
Oh no!
Yeah, but I love Telluride. Telluride's amazing, and all power to their elbow for doing it.
So Riz, I think you're muted. You were saying something.
No, I was just saying something that I really love about festivals is, sometimes you make a film and then you don't really see how people get to react to it. And so I guess it's just pretty cool. It's kind of brings filmmaking a bit closer to live performance in that sense, where you get to vibe off the audience. And it's just great to be able to share a movie with an audience and understand what they think about it. Although Carey, it's not always a good experience.
Painful.
But it's just
Humbling.
great to be able to share it in a community. And I think that's I think what we all need more of, maybe.
Yeah. I was going to close you with Rachel, because you are the belle of the opening night of 2020 virtual AFI Fest. So I think we're at AFI Fest. You ought to, go last here.
Well, I mean, even in the virtual sense, the AFI Fest has been amazing. There have been there's so many incredible movies here, so many still to come. And I also love film festivals like everyone else. It's such a cool way it feels similar to making an independent film. The making of it, as everyone's kind of said, feels like summer camp, feels so intimate. And it feels like film festivals share a little bit of that DNA. So it feels like a really special continuation of getting to make an independent film, getting to share them in this format. But also, just to go back to something you said a little bit earlier about female directors, it's so amazing that 4 out of the 8 people here today are here with films directed by women. But it's also really important, and it's worth noting, I suppose, that the 4 are also women that are here today. And it's so, so, so important that men in positions of influence are also working with female directors so that they continue to get platforms like this, but not just this, so that they continue to get platforms that go beyond these independent film festivals, which is a space that they have been celebrated in and amplified in, but that hasn't always translated into the studio world. And this is not a knock against you amazing gentlemen in here.
No, it's important.
Women as well. But it's really, really important that in spaces like this, that it's not just women who are here representing films made by women.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I am going to just read my outro, which is that on behalf of the American Film Institute and the Hollywood Reporter, I want to thank all of our wonderful panelists and all of you who are joining us virtually. Hopefully we can all be together in person next year. In the meantime, we would love to hear from you on Twitter, tagging #AFI Fest or at Scott Feinberg. You can follow more at thr.com/therace or via the Awards Chatter podcast or the AFI website. We hope you will check out tomorrow's AFI Summit session, Centering Characters with Mental Health Conditions in Film and Television, which will be moderated by Dr. Stacey L. Smith at 1 p.m. Pacific. And for information on all AFI Fest offerings and AFI Summit sessions, again, it's fest.afi.com. So a huge thank you to all 8 of you. What a treat in these dark times to get to hear from such great artists. And thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Bye, guys.
Much love.
Bye. Bye.